Hi everyone, this is Scott Davis. I'm the instructor for Bio 137. This class is Human Anatomy and Physiology Part 1 for BCTC. So first thing, this is going to be a very short video. It is our first official lecture video, but it is not going to be as long as most of our videos for this class, just so that you can get an idea of how the lectures are going to work. So before we actually dive in and start talking about content, I want to make sure that everyone is where they need to be, because there are several things that you need to do before diving into the lectures. So if this were an in-person class, I start with having everyone write down some personal background information just so I can get an idea of who's in the class, and so that students can kind of let me know a little bit about them. You do not need to do this for our class, but I do want to let you know kind of what we would do if this were an in-person class. So I would ask everyone to write down their full name and then the program that they plan to enter. And what I mean by that is, let me know, are you a nursing student? Are you a respiratory therapy student? Are you a sonography student? Do you plan to go to med school? Something like that. And based on that, that kind of gets you thinking about, well, which parts of this class, and when I get to Bio 139, which parts of that class am I going to want to pay more special attention to? Now, if you are going into med school, if you are a nursing student, obviously both of those, the entire class of Bio 137 and Bio 139 are going to be very important to you. But if you are, say, an exercise physiology student, you will probably want to pay more attention to things like skeletal system, muscular system, cardiovascular system, and respiratory, things like that. So just kind of start thinking about which topics am I going to come back to later when I get into my allied health or medical program. The next thing I ask is, how much time do you plan to spend on this material outside of class per week? And outside of class in an online class can mean something different. When you are actively working on watching lecture videos or doing lab activities and watching lab videos and reading or doing your mastering A&P assignments, that is being in class. Even though you're at your house or wherever you watch these videos and do your homework, you are considered in class. But outside of that, you are going to work on this class a lot. And when I ask how much time do you plan to spend outside of this class, I mean studying. Not watching lecture videos, not doing homework, but studying. And that number should be a lot higher than what most students expect. Bio 137 and Bio 139 both require more work outside of class than inside of class. They require more work outside of class than any other class that we teach at BCTC, really. So I would probably plan to spend somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 hours per week easily on this material outside of class. In summer semesters, everything is accelerated, and 1 week is the equivalent of about 2.5 or 3 weeks. So you would multiply that 15-ish hours by 2 or 3. So you're going to be spending a lot of time on this material outside of class. And lastly, I like everyone to tell me, what was the video that you were supposed to watch before day one? What was it about? And That was something that was in the Start Here module, something that was in our day one checklist, something that was in the announcement for welcome to Bio 137. And I always get these looks of, uh-oh, I was supposed to do something that I haven't done. So make sure you watch this. And I will tell you that that video, it doesn't have anything to do with anatomy or physiology. It is something entirely different. And I want everyone to watch that before starting this class. So hopefully everyone has done that. Now, before we begin, what questions do you have? In an online class, you can't raise your hand. So it puts a little bit of impetus on you. It requires you to reach out to me. And I am the instructor that's known for being a little weird by my peers. No other instructor likes to give out their personal cell phone. I love giving out my personal cell phone because I know in an online class, students aren't necessarily watching their videos or studying between 8 o'clock and 5 o'clock. Some students study on the weekends. Some students study in the evening or even the middle of the night. I want you to be able to ask me those questions when you have them. I may not always be able to monitor. So let's say it's Thursday night, overnight at 3:30 in the morning, and you have a question. I still want you to send it to me immediately. I just won't see it until Friday morning when I wake up. But I still want it there waiting on me if that's when you had your question. Or if it's a holiday, or if it's a Saturday afternoon. I'm always on the job. So send me your questions when you have them. If you wait, you may forget. If you wait, it puts you behind. Ask them when you have them. I am always happy to answer. The only dumb question is the one that you have and you don't ask me. I've heard every question imaginable, and even if you think the question is silly, I don't. I want you to ask it. Because if it's a question, that means you're unclear, and I don't want any student in my class to be unclear of something. So that said, let's dive in to biology. Let's talk Bio 137, beginning with Chapter 1, where we are going to have an orientation to the human body. And that's our first official slide. What the heck is that? And this is not a rhetorical question. I want you sitting in front of your computer talking to it. I want you answering when I ask questions, even if no one's around to hear you, or even if your partner or father or child or sibling is sitting next to you and you're feeling a little goofy. I want you to answer questions when I have them. I'll never hear it, but I still want you to answer. Take a minute and think. What are those? What is this person wearing? Well, obviously, those are picnic pants. You sit down, you cross your legs, crisscross applesauce, and all of a sudden you've got a little table in front of you where you can eat a picnic. Everyone needs a pair of those. So that brings us to this. What the heck are those things? Take a minute and see if you can take a guess at what those things are. Well, obviously they are mustache guards for when you're drinking a beverage and you don't want your mustache getting foamy or wet. They block that liquid from getting all in your mustache. Everyone needs at least one of those. And finally, what is that thing? Well, it's kind of shaped weird. It's got some levers or buttons and knobs to turn, it looks like maybe. What is that thing? Well, it's there to shape your nose. If you don't like the way your nose is shaped, you can wear it and reshape your nose, apparently. All three of those things you can order online. They are actual things that I found online that you can order. I'm not really suggesting that you order any of those. But I was asking, what are they? And probably, unless you've had me before, you probably haven't seen any of those things before. But I bet if you looked at them long enough, you had some good guesses about what they may be. They might not have been correct, but I bet you were able to guess something similar to what they were. I always love talking about this in class because I do have the students shout out what do they think those things were. But by now you're probably thinking, I signed up for human anatomy and physiology. Why is he showing me picnic pants and nose shapers? Well, that's because that is the central idea of our class. Keep those three things in mind. We're going to come back to them in just a couple of slides. But first, we talk about anatomy and physiology. This is a class that covers both of those. So what are anatomy and what is anatomy? What is physiology? Anatomy, by definition, is the study of form or structure. It looks at something and discusses what does it do based on what is its structure. The what does it do, that's going to be the physiology part. The how is it shaped, that's the anatomy part. And anatomy comes from some root words that mean to cut apart. And there are different types of anatomy. There is gross anatomy, or also called macroscopic anatomy. That's not a typo, that is macroscopic. Macro means big. So gross anatomy, or macroscopic anatomy, is the study of structures that are big enough to be seen with the naked eye, or without using a microscope or magnifying glass. What is the shape of something that's big enough to see? And well, the opposite of that is microanatomy or microscopic anatomy. And these are the study of the really small things that are too small to be seen without some sort of magnification. And third, there is developmental anatomy. And in developmental anatomy, we're looking at how things change throughout the different stages of life. If you look at a baby, and you look at a toddler, and you look at a child, and a teenager, and a young adult versus an older adult, there are some differences. Both differences in things that we can see with the naked eye, and differences in things at the microscopic level. So things change in form throughout our lifetime. That's what developmental anatomy studies. How do those structures change throughout your life? Now compare that to physiology. Physiology, we said, was the study of function. So the study of function of the body. How do things work? And physiology is divided based on the organ system that we are looking at. For example, renal physiology studies the kidneys and the urinary system. Cardiovascular physiology studies the heart and the blood vessels. But now we're going to talk about how those things go together. And we're going to talk about something called the principle of complementarity, or complementarity of structure and function. What does that mean? Now we're going to go back and talk about the picnic pants, or the mustache guards, or the nose shaper. None of us knew what those things were when we first saw them, probably. But when we thought about what could they be, how did we approach it? Probably we were looking at these things and thinking, what do they look like they would do? Well, that kind of looks like a mustache or maybe a boomerang or something like that, but we can tell by looking at it what it might be good for. Here, what does that thing look like? What might it be good for? And that's the principle of complementarity, or the complementarity of structure and function. Anatomy and physiology are a package deal. You don't get to study one without studying the other, because what a structure can do depends on its specific form. Things do things based on their shape. When we get to the heart in Bio 139, we're going to see that it's got 4 chambers. 2 of them are very, very weak. 2 of them are very, very strong. And the heart will fill up with blood. And those weaker chambers expand kind of like balloons, but those stronger chambers squeeze and move blood around our body. It can do those things based on its shape in different regions. The kidneys have little microscopic structures that help filter our blood and keep it clean. The bones, the long bones at least, are these long hollow tubes. And something we're going to learn is a hollow tube is much stronger than a solid tube. If our bones were solid, 1, they'd be a lot heavier, but 2, they'd be a lot weaker. By having hollow bones, they are able to support more weight. So this is going to be an ongoing theme throughout all of Biology 137 and 139. What a structure can do depends on its form. That is the principle of complementarity, or the complementarity of structure and function. But there are different levels of structural organization, starting with the very, very small, too small to even be seen with a normal microscope, all the way up to the full-sized organism. And we're going to look at all of these levels in Bio 137 and Bio 139. Starting with the very, very small level, the chemical level. We're going to talk about atoms, the smallest structure. Technically, if you take chemistry and physics, you will learn there are things smaller than atoms. But we're not going to talk about those other than what are atoms made of in our next chapter. But atoms, really, we will say, for purposes of our class, atoms are the smallest level of organization. And we put atoms together to form molecules. Molecules are just combinations of atoms. So we start to add molecules together, and one of the things that we can get are called organelles. Organelles are small structures within our cell. We have trillions of cells, yes, trillions. Well, organelles are structures within our cells that perform specific functions. So, an organelle, we can say, is a group of molecules working together to perform a specific function. Well, there are different types of organelles. And when they start to work together, we get a cell. So we are at the organelle and cell, we are at the cellular level. Cells are the building blocks of our body. Cells are groups of organelles working together to perform a specific function. We said organelles are groups of molecules working together to perform a specific function. Well, cells are groups of organelles working together to perform a specific function. Now we get to tissues. Tissues are groups of cells working together to perform a specific function. When we get to chapter 4, we're going to learn about different types of tissues. There are things like muscle tissue and nervous tissue, various types of tissues, but they are all groups of cells working together to perform a specific function. Well, start putting some different types of tissues together. And one of the things that we will get is an organ. Here we see a blood vessel. It could be a stomach. It could be a brain. It could be one of our biceps in our arm. These are all organs. Well, organs are groups of tissues working together to perform a specific function. Here we can see some smooth muscle tissue, some connective tissue, some epithelial tissue. Those are just some examples. But they are all working together to perform a specific function, which is acting as a blood vessel, carrying blood. Next, we get to the organ system level. By now, you probably can guess the definition of an organ system. It is a group of organs working together to perform a specific function. Here we see the cardiovascular system, which contains the heart, the arteries, veins, venules, arterioles, capillaries, different types of blood vessels. The cardiovascular system. And lastly, we get to the organism or the organismal level. Organismal level is a group of organ systems working together to perform a similar function. And that function is to keep you alive. All of our different organ systems have different jobs, but they all work together to keep us alive. Now let's backtrack. So we have the organismal level, the organ system level, the organ level, the tissue level, the muscle level, the cellular level, not muscle, the cellular level, the organelle, the molecule, the atoms, going backward, getting smaller and smaller as we go. But right here, at the cellular level, there's something special. What happens at the cellular level that is of particular importance? Something happens when we stick atoms together to get molecules, when we stick molecules together to get organelles, when we stick organelles together to get smooth muscle or whatever type of cell that we have. What happens at that cellular level that was not present at the atomic, the molecular, or the organelle level? Something appears at the cellular level. That is where we get life. The different types of cells exhibit the properties of life that are not present at the organelle level, that are not present at the molecular level, are not present at the atomic level. Atoms are not alive, molecules are not alive, organelles are not alive, but cells are. At the cellular level, life appears. And that is of particular importance. So when we get to chapter 3 and we're talking about cells, that is where we are finally talking about life. Now, in our outline, there are going to be areas that we do not cover in lecture. There are necessary life functions and survival needs for humans. Those things you are responsible for knowing, but we will not devote lecture time to them. I will still be happy to answer questions if you have questions about them, but we will not devote lecture time to them. So make sure you still go through your outline and fill those things in. They are just self-study. There will be some of that scattered throughout most of our chapters. And I will never make things that are difficult self-study. I will just do smaller things as self-study. The more challenging topics we will always cover in our lectures. Okay, so that is the end of our first lecture. That is not the end of chapter 1. There will be 1 or 2 more lecture videos in chapter 1. But for now, take a breather, absorb everything that we talked about, rewatch the video if you need to, make sure everything on your outline is filled out. You will not turn those outlines in. Those are your study aids. So make sure to have everything on your outline filled out so that when you're studying for the exam, it's there for you to go through. Organize your notes. Ask me questions as you have them. All right, and I will see you in our next lecture video. Take care.